now will obviously get a copy of the slides later on. So just to remind you, you've heard the announcement. We will be recording this webinar such that you can get a copy of it at the end. So we'll send that out to you within a week of this presentation being provided to you. So welcome to the return of our webinar for Demystifying Your Journey to Accreditation. So this is to allow UKAS to better support you in attaining accreditation for your services that you wish to provide. So my name's Paul File. I'll be presenting to you today. I'm accreditation specialist based in UKAS, where I've been working for just under a year. Prior to that, I was working on what I would say the other side of the fence. So I've been within the TIC industry and the TIC sector for about 30 years prior to joining UKAS, and I've worked in 3 cabs that provided management system certification, food services, and also validation and verification services, as well as inspection services. Prior to that, I was in the power sector, so I was involved in the design, development, manufacture, installation, and commissioning of power station equipment, as well as the construction of power systems, particularly in the nuclear and sort of fossil fuel coal stations many years ago. I spent about 12 years in that sector. So just for your information, as I've said previously, the webinar will be recorded, is being recorded, and what we will do is we will provide you with a copy at the end of this session, certainly within the next week of the presentation being given. Now, throughout the session, we'll have you muted. So if you do have any questions you want to ask, please type them into the Q&A, which is open, and we will address those questions if we have time at the end. If not, we will get back to you with a Q&A sort of summary of what's happened during this event and perhaps other events that we've held previously. If you have any difficulties, again, exactly the same thing, just type something in the Q&A section, and our other hosts on the call will deal with those issues directly. So I'm going to switch off my camera for this presentation. So I'll switch it back on a little bit later on when we get to the Q&A section, so we don't distract you from the information contained in the slides. So the previous webinar in this series was launched a week ago. It was the first in this series, and it was titled The Purpose of Accreditation, where we actually introduced the concept of accreditation to get you started. Now, if you missed that webinar, you can access that recording of it on our website in the events section under resources. So I do recommend, if you did miss that, to certainly go and view that, and it's about 1 hour long. So if we move on to today's webinar, and the purpose of today's webinar is simply to provide information and resources on the next steps in your journey once you've actually determined that you're ready for accreditation. So in this webinar, we're going to cover, is accreditation actually right for you? Is your business ready to proceed to accreditation? And I think this is a very important section. We'll then take you through beginning your application. We'll look at the first key stages of pre-assessment, initial assessment. I'll also introduce blended assessment, which is becoming more popular as a consequence of COVID. So I'll just talk to you a little bit about what blended assessment is and how it works. Another important aspect will be the assessment findings, if anything are raised. So I'll cover that and the process of addressing any findings. I'll then briefly talk a little bit about maintaining your accreditation, and I'll just give you some indicative costs around accreditation by using a simple explanation, and then I'll introduce you to what's next in terms of your journey to accreditation. So is accreditation right for you? So I think it's an important question any organization should ask itself before starting on the journey. And just to help you in terms of that, I think we have identified through surveys that we've conducted of our client base, and we have over 2,600 clients currently with UKAS. So I think it's important to actually talk to this. So the survey results actually have been very useful, and I covered those in much more detail in our previous presentation. So accreditation can highlight gaps and weaknesses in operational capability. So in terms of that, the ongoing assessment process associated with gaining accreditation will actually identify weaknesses and opportunities that you can use to improve the effectiveness of your processes and service, thus providing and delivering improvement in quality, and often relating to improvement in your costs. And these are one of the benefits that we certainly got feedback from those surveyed. Another area which we seen benefits was from the respect of independent assurance of technical competence. So it does provide confidence to your respective clients, both existing and new, of your ability to actually deliver services for which you are being accredited for or hold accreditation for. Another benefit that can be gained through accreditation is in relation to identifying and reducing risks to your organization. So accreditation standards, depending on which one you're applying for, is a great mechanism for managing and mitigating risks, which is very important and provides confidence to you as a business and to the people who work in your business as well as your clients. Now, accreditation is recognized and accepted globally, and this is a great benefit to you, not just in the national market, but also in the international market, as accreditation can facilitate the ability to do import and export activity. So UKAS is mutually recognized across the globe. I know we've got mutual recognition memberships with the likes of the IAF, ILAC, and EA. So having UKAS accreditation can aid in the removal of barriers and facilitate both national and international trade for you if you do apply. Another benefit we've seen is in terms of confidence within industry and within industrial supply chains. And obviously that is in many instances a prerequisite for actually doing business within those sectors. So again, some sectors, as I've said, mandate it. For example, the likes of the forensic services in the UK, you do need to be accredited to either 17020 or 17025 and reviewed against the Forensic Science Regulator Code of Practice. So there are a multitude of other areas where accreditation is actually mandated, and therefore it does give you a benefit within certain sectors. Now, accreditation does provide confidence to your employees and other stakeholders as well. So I think it's very important that through having accreditation, it does demonstrate that commitment, and it gives you a clear opportunity to have a controlled management system in place to aid that consistency and confidence in the work that you are undertaking as an organization. And again, it does support, as I said, the generation of new business. So prospective clients and businesses will use accreditation status as a selection criteria when evaluating external service providers and their suppliers. And as such, accreditation can offer an edge in the competitive environment that we work in, both nationally and internationally. So UKAS, being a member of many sort of organizations like the IAF, does facilitate the ability to do international trade. So is accreditation applicable to you as an organization? So here are a number of the symbols and sectors that UKAS actually provide accreditation within the UK market. So first question, as I said, is to ask yourself before you actually begin the process is whether accreditation is applicable to your business and the sector that you're actually working in. So UKAS accreditation is granted to organizations that have actually demonstrated that they fully meet the requirements of the relevant national and international conformity assessment standards. So we provide accreditation in the sectors of testing, product certification, personnel certification, calibration and inspection, as well as biobanking management systems, reference materials, proficiency testing, validation and verification, which tends to be around sort of your climate change activities as well as medical. So once you're sure that accreditation is relevant for your organization and it's a journey you wish to embark upon, I think if you haven't already done it, it's important that you buy the relevant conformity assessment type standards, and there are many. And what I've done is I put some of those conformity assessment standards on this slide. Now, it may be such that your organization is only in terms of requirements needing one, but it also could be that if you're a larger organization, perhaps that you need a series of accreditations, and that we can provide you and support you in determining that. So standards do provide the requirements and the knowledge that organizations actually need to succeed and deliver their services safely and effectively. So standards do define best practice in many different areas and come in a numbering different formats as well. So standards are generally formulated under the likes of the British standards or European standards or globally recognized standards such as ISO. Now, accreditation is granted against these specific standards. And like I said, again, it may be such that more than one are applicable to the services that you provide. So it's important to understand that you actually talk to UKAS before you embark on that journey of accreditation. So getting in contact with UKAS, there are a number of methods that you can follow. And the next slide just gives a very simple summary, and all this information is actually available on our website. So if you have any general accreditation or technical inquiries that you want to do, just use the email address info@ukas.com, and there's a telephone number there that you can contact. If you're actually starting that journey of applying for accreditation, then please contact our sales team at UKAS, sales@ukas.com. And I'm not going to go into the details of training because I will cover that in a little bit more detail later on. So before you begin your journey towards accreditation, we do highly recommend that you get in contact with UKAS. We can help you identify which application forms you should be completing. We can identify the costs involved in the process, and as I said, answer any technical questions you may have. So again, very important that before you embark on your journey, that you start your communication with UKAS. So again, a very important question to ask yourself is, are you actually ready to go and proceed for accreditation? And we have a multitude of resources available which can help you in terms of identifying any gaps that you have. So these materials can actually help determine whether your business is ready to apply for accreditation. Before you actually begin your journey, there are a few things I would recommend that you do. So familiarize yourself with the standards and ensure that you're actually meeting those requirements. So do a gap analysis against that to determine that you are actually meeting those requirements. I would also recommend that you understand any supporting publications that will be relevant to you as an organization for the accreditation that you're seeking. And there is a lot of information available on the UKAS website. Supporting publications could include the likes of IAF documents, ILAC documents, EA documents of specific schemes and requirements that you're going for. Another source of help, particularly if you're going for ISO 17025 as a standard, is that we do have a readiness assessment tool available, and that can be accessed through our website. And again, I do recommend, if you feel that you lack the knowledge around the standards that you're going for, that you do consider training courses applicable to those standards. And I will talk a little bit more about that later on. So to help you in your journey, you should identify the relevant supporting UKAS publications, which will be required to gain accreditation. So there could be international publications relevant to your area of accreditation. And all this information is available on the UKAS website. They tend to be under resources and broken down into publications. Don't forget to sign up also to receive any monthly updates. So UKAS provide a series of publications which can include information on the various standards that you may be out for consultation or have been withdrawn or are under review and about to be reissued. So again, it's a free service. Just sign up for it and make sure that flow of information is coming into your organization to help you on that journey. Again, I talked about the readiness assessment tool briefly. This one is particular to 17025, though we are looking at implementing other ones for other standards. We found that there's a particular need from this sector, and hence we've introduced that. And it's a simple readiness assessment tool which focuses on the main themes of the accreditation standard. It doesn't cover everything. However, it's a simple process of answering yes, no, or maybe, and it will help you determine the readiness of your organization and meeting that accreditation standard, but also are you ready to actually apply for accreditation. So again, watch this space. We are looking to expand this to other standards in the future, so keep an eye out for that. The other area which I introduced briefly on other slides is to support your journey to accreditation. We do offer public and on-site training courses, as well as providing international advisory services to other accreditation bodies around the globe. So while training is not mandated, certainly not mandated, it may be something that can help you gain accreditation. And it can be useful actually in helping you demystify some of the more and complex areas of the standard, or it can actually provide the tools and techniques you need to fill in the remaining gaps and ensure your systems and your processes are developed in line with the requirements of accreditation. So our focus is on empowering our customers to add value to their organization through our portfolio of courses. And these can be provided both in the UK and overseas. Our expert trainers are committed to providing you with the knowledge and the skills that you need. Now, all these tutors are UKAS or UKAS current or previous employees of the organization. So they have a wealth of knowledge and opportunity to help support you on those training courses. And they are specifically experienced within the various accreditation standards in the courses that we provide. Now, these courses can come in different formats. They can be public courses. So these are run face-to-face around the country. And the benefit of having these public courses is perhaps there will be peers from other related industries who have similar challenges to you. So our trainers would draw from that UKAS expertise and experience and help facilitate group discussions and provide a lively and interactive learning experience for you on site. We also do provide virtual instructor-led training. And again, this has the benefits that you don't have to travel to an event. You can literally join online and go through and have the same experience. So obviously it is a virtual option, but it does provide the same training without the need to travel. So virtual training is designed to actually simulate the traditional face-to-face learning experience. And again, you have peers from across the board who are interested within a particular sector. So we, through this learning in virtual environment, do have breakouts, and we create the opportunity to collaborate and learn from your tutors and each other as well. Other things that we can provide is on-site courses. So rather, if you are a larger organization and want to put a large number of people through the same courses, coursework can be provided, and the courses can actually be run either at your own facilities or off-site purely for your organization. The experience is exactly the same. The other thing we provide is e-learning on demand. So our online courses are ideal if you are looking for a deeper understanding of some of the more complex topics surrounding accreditation. And again, all this information in terms of what we provide is all available on the UKAS website. So applying for accreditation. So the application process is quite simple to follow, but obviously the intricacies can be quite complex. So we normally go through a very simple 6-phase process. So you need to obviously complete application forms. So those application forms can be downloaded from the relevant UKAS website under ukas.com applications. Once you've completed the relevant forms and provided the relevant information, that is then submitted into UKAS. So once we actually receive your application, we will actually process that internally. And what we normally do is we will provide you once an acknowledgement email, and within that acknowledgement email, you will be given a unique 5-digit reference number. Now, this 5-digit reference number will be your unique identifier and will stay with you throughout this journey of accreditation. Now, what we then do is once you're ready to go, we would pass on the application and the relevant documentation to one of our section heads. So depending on the accreditation that you're going after, that section head would reach out to you and talk to you to try and answer any questions you have, and maybe fill in any particular areas where we need more information. They would then assign to you an assessment manager. And that assessment manager would stay with you on your journey throughout accreditation, and they can become a technical or a commercial focal point for you on this particular journey. So once your application has been submitted, we do apply application fees, and once they're paid, your assessment manager will actually start to process the journey of accreditation with you. Now, the first part of that journey is optional, and it is a pre-assessment. Now, I think the value of actually going for a pre-assessment is that it is an informal visit, it is optional, and as I said, it determines how ready you are for accreditation. So it can be a valuable step in the process because it can actually reduce delays in gaining accreditation. The visit is attended by normally your UKAS assessment manager and possibly technical assessors who are specialized in particularly your sort of area of expertise, and they're there to actually work with you. Now, the period of that pre-assessment could be 1 day, it could be 4 days, depending on how big and complex your organization is and what you require from UKAS in terms of that pre-assessment as well. So it does confirm your readiness to proceed to accreditation. Now, the assessment manager would provide you with a quote for the work involved. At the end of the pre-assessment, then you would be provided with a detailed report, and any findings would be included on that pre-assessment report to identify perhaps areas of weaknesses that you need to address. And those could be small concerns, or they could be obviously sections which you are deficient in and need to address before going for formal application. So there are, as I said, other requirements outside of the core accreditation standard, which will also possibly be mandated in terms of publications that you need to meet. So having a pre-assessment can actually also identify any concerns around that. And if you actually have all the relevant information at hand to be able to apply or proceed through your initial assessment. The good thing also about meeting your assessment manager is that it enables your staff to start to understand the process accreditation goes through, and it also gives you the opportunity to interact with your assessment manager and work with him in determining the best steps next to proceed on. And obviously, it's a good opportunity to look for perhaps indicators of best practice within the marketplace. So some of the common problems that we do find organizations come up against when going for accreditation is that they do misunderstand some of the requirements within the standard or within the scheme documents that also are applicable. So having a pre-assessment could actually help you iron out some of these activities. We also often find that there are missing requirements against the standard, or that those particular requirements are actually being incorrectly applied to the organization. So there's a great opportunity to come through that. As I've mentioned, there are also additional requirements which may come out of other documents such as the IAF, ILAC, or EA mandatory documents. So it's important that you know which ones are applicable to you and that you've addressed those mandatory requirements as well. There is often a lack of implementation of processes and policies. So, you may have the documented procedures and policies in place. However, you haven't actually implemented them satisfactorily or have sufficient information available to gain accreditation. Often, more than most, we find that when we're actually doing assessments, that we find that whilst you have documented policies and processes in place, they actually may not follow the practice within your business. And so this is a common problem that we need you to think about and make sure that you audit your own processes first to make sure that the policies and processes are actually reflective of what you've written down. The business doing the right thing, but lacking the documented evidence required to prove that it's doing the right thing. So this is a big area where we find companies do fall down on. So please make sure that you've got adequate records in place to actually demonstrate that what you're doing is in accordance with the accreditation standards. So addressing these problems in advance can lead to reduction in cost, and also it gives you an improvement in terms of the time frame for addressing or gaining accreditation. So I do highly recommend you investigate and make sure these common problems are addressed before you proceed down that. But certainly if you do go for a pre-assessment, if these common problems exist within your organization, it gives you the opportunity to address them and identify them before the formal initial application starts. So another area to think about is your management systems. So management systems, I'm not going to read through this slide in any detail, but every organization that goes for accreditation will require to have a management systems in place. And a document I do recommend you read for all the terminology is ISO 9000. So a quality management system is the way in which an organization actually manages the interrelated parts of the business in order to achieve its objectives. So this important set of documents does become the blueprint of your accreditation and will contain all the policies relating to the standards in question. So conformity assessment standards, these are the standards by which you get accreditation for, tend to be broken down into a number of sections. And these elements tend to be common across all the conformity assessment standards. So normally you will see a section on general requirements, which may look at legal and contractual matters, or it could look at how you manage impartiality. There will be structural requirements, and that tends to talk, as its name implies, about your organizational structure, the top management, and what operational controls you have in place. Resource requirements, so as the name implies, it breaks down in detail the requirements of the competence of personnel and things of that nature that you need to have in place to be able to meet the requirements of the standard. There is often a big section on process requirements, and that will take you through the processes from receiving an inquiry to delivering whatever the service is that you are seeking accreditation for. Then there tends to be a final section, which is the management system requirements. Now, most conformity assessment standards are broken down, and you have the option of having a 9001 system in place, or it will give you a second option, which gives you the core management system requirements that you need to have in place. And these are simply management system documents. So you have to have a documented management system which is implemented and maintained, and evidence of that. There is a requirement for document control, a section on records control, how you manage non-conformities within your business and how you manage the corrective action that you take, as well as improvements and actions to address any risks you have and any opportunities to improve your business. And two important aspects of that is your internal audits of your management system and obviously the management review. So all very important parts of that, and you will see these broken down in more detail in the conformity assessment standard. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the initial assessment. So what's involved in this? Now, the assessment will normally take place 2 to 3 months after a pre-assessment, or on the conclusion that you're ready to go for an initial assessment. Now, what's involved in an initial assessment is that there would be an opening meeting, and this would take place to agree the arrangements between you and your assessment manager and the rest of the team. The assessment would involve a detailed review of records, your systems and processes, and obviously ensure that you have the right competence within the organization to meet the requirements of accreditation. It normally involves interviews of people on site, or so that would include your staff, your senior management and managers, and that may involve the witnessing of undertaking certain activities depending on your scope of accreditation that you're going for. We would undertake different types of audits, so it could be a full vertical audit or a combination of full vertical and horizontal assessment. Now, vertical tends to be where we may, for example, follow an inquiry all the way to its delivery, and a horizontal assessment whereby we might look at a particular process, so how you handle non-conformities. So both techniques in terms of assessment techniques would take place as part of the assessment process. So as we go through this, we obviously will provide you with updates on any non-conformances that we find, but also these would be discussed at the end at a closing meeting. Now, after the end of the meeting, and normally within a period of 10 working days, we would actually provide you with a detailed written report. And that would obviously detail the findings or any improvement actions that we identified against the accreditation requirements. And you would then be asked to advise UKAS how you would address those. And then you would be given 3 months maximum to actually supply evidence to actually demonstrate that you've addressed any non-conformities raised. So once that's done, then obviously we would move into the final stage of granting accreditation, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. Now, as part of my introduction, I said I would talk to you about blended assessments, and I think it's important that you gain an appreciation of what a blended assessment is and the approach and why we take this approach on occasion. So during COVID, many organizations, as a consequence of the lockdown, were unable to provide or have people coming on their sites, and that a lot of people were working from home. And obviously, this was guidance that was coming out of the government. So what we moved towards in UKAS was an ability to actually assess remotely. This has some great advantages, and it was actually very positively received by a lot of our clients. So a blended approach to assessments could be that some of the assessment would be done remotely using IT as a tool to be able to facilitate that process, and some of that assessment would be completed on site. And it can be from one extreme to the other. I mean, using sort of remote assessment activities does have its downsides. Obviously, the upsides are very evident. It can save you money. It means you have to have less resource available to guide your staff around at the time. But there are obviously those concerns that if technology, which can be, as we all know, can be prone to glitches, fails, then obviously it causes problems in doing that remote activity. It also is important that our assessors do attend site where we can, because obviously it then enables us to see the working environment and also witness any activities that we need to witness. So again, your assessment manager would be able to talk you through this approach and how we actually use blended assessment activity to assess you as a particular client against one of the conformity assessment standards. So assessment findings. Now, I'm going to go straight into this. So if we find any areas whereby your system is deficient against either the conformity assessment standards such as 17025 or any of the mandatory documents that are also applicable, then we would raise an improvement action report. And again, that would be informed to you at the end of the visit. So we would require you to complete an improvement action summary form, which would detail the outcomes of the root cause. So we expect you to look at the root cause of the deficiency and to come up with any corrective actions that you need to do to address the deficiency and any supplementary information to demonstrate that you've actually addressed it. So from an initial assessment, we would expect you to come back within 12 weeks, no more than 12 weeks, with all the relevant information. That would then enable your assessment manager and any technical assessors to be able to close out, to review those findings and close them out. If there's a need for further information, we would get back to you. Once all the addresses, the non-conformities have actually been addressed satisfactorily, then obviously we would move into the final stage of decision making. And obviously that final process of closing out any deficiencies normally takes up to 4 weeks, depending on the number and nature of the deficiencies that were raised. Now, obviously, as part of the process, we cannot have the those involved in the assessment to be able to confirm that the requirements of the conformity assessment standard and mandatory documents have been met. So we do have independent decision makers within the organization. Now, they tend to work at 3 stages. So one is the contract review stage, and that's carried out by the assessment manager before the assessment would be undertaken, and he ensures the scope of activity is correct. He also ensures, or she ensures, that the assessment team is the right skill set to be able to undertake that work, and that any effort required to undertake that work in terms of duration is made, that would then go to a decision maker to review and authorize. That process normally takes a couple of weeks on average. It can take up to 4 weeks. The other area is a provisional decision, and a provisional decision would occur after your initial assessment is complete. And that starts by the independent decision maker actually reviewing that a proper full assessment has taken place prior to closure of any non-conformities. And this stage of the decision process is probably the most involved, as it determines whether the assessment has actually been conducted appropriately, and if the recommendations being made by the assessment manager are supported by evidence within the report. Now, normally this happens within the first couple of weeks post the completion of the initial assessment. And this can vary, obviously, because on the complexity and size of the organization, some do actually take much longer. So the decision maker at that stage would reach out to you with a schedule, and obviously that would then be required for you to confirm that the schedule meets your requirements and actually has been covered the scope of activity as well that we assessed. Once all the non-conformities have been satisfactorily addressed, then there is a final decision to be made. So provided those have all been satisfactorily closed out, a letter confirming the outcome of the decision is sent to you, the customer, by the decision maker, with a copy of the published schedule or the intended published schedule, as well as seeking your agreement that that is accurate. We would then issue within the next week or two formal schedule, which would go up onto our website, and appropriate certificates to demonstrate that you're accredited, and obviously a joining pack. So once it's accredited, then obviously you would be formally awarded and can start to use some of the accreditation symbols which are applicable to your organization as a means of demonstrating that you've actually achieved accreditation. So accredited organizations can use all these symbols that are relevant to your organization to demonstrate that you have gained accreditation. Now, UKAS is licensed by BEIS, which is the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, although that is going through a revamp as we speak. And it is there for you to actually use and confirm that these national accreditation standards and symbols are applicable to your organization, and it does signify that the government recognition of your accreditation achievements. So we do actually encourage you to use the national accreditation symbols for promoting your business. And as I said, full guidance will be given on how to use these logos and symbols. And again, that is all available on the UKAS website. Again, if you trade overseas, you can use the relevant IAF or ILAC symbols as well in conjunction with your UKAS symbols, and just to actually show that you have that global acceptance as well. So promoting your accreditation, we do obviously recommend you look to promote that, and we would share in that journey with you as well. So we do have a variety of promotional brochures which you can download and use or link to your website. There are promotional videos available as well. So we have a series of videos which are posted on our UKAS YouTube channel. And these can be actually linked or embedded on your website as well. We do recommend that you subscribe to this channel such that you can receive alerts of any new videos that we're adding. We do obviously celebrate World Accreditation Day as well, which tends to be held around the 9th of June every year. And it's a way of promoting accreditation. We do work with some clients in terms of case studies as well. And obviously some of our clients as well provide testimonials, which we may use. And again, it's another way of promoting your accreditation through UKAS. So maintaining accreditation. I'm not going to go through the detail of the cycle of accreditation maintenance because it was covered in the previous webinar. But I think what I would do is just like to go over some of the key aspects of which you need to address. So your accreditation, once confirmed, you will be audited on a regular basis. However, what I would say between those visits, it's important that you actually inform and keep in contact with your assessment manager of any changes that may actually impact or affect your scope of accreditation. So your assessment manager is always there to help support you. So if there are any changes, that could be to processes, procedures, or it could be to changes sort of, moving to different locations, then it's important that you actually talk to your assessment manager. Likewise, if your technical competence changes, then it may be important that you talk to your assessment manager in terms of how you're going to address that. And that could be key people leaving the organization. It's important that you actually keep up to date with any regulatory changes in your sector as well, because obviously those regulations that you follow do change, and it's important that you do address them. So again, keep up to date, keep your assessment manager informed of any key changes that you're making. I've talked about subscribing to some of our documentation. So we have regular updates, whether it's technical bulletins or publications. And again, they will keep you up to date with any changes to the conformity assessment standards, the mandatory documents coming out of IAF or ILAC, and they're a useful source of information, including anything which is going under consultation, which you have the opportunity to provide input into as well. Again, keep up to date with your internal audits regime. Just because you've got accreditation, it shouldn't be stopped. It's there to give you assurance that you don't have any major issues within your organization. So keep that up. It's an important aspect which we look at every time. Ensure that documents are controlled and maintained, and ensure that you continue to retain the quality records that you need to be able to demonstrate ongoing conformance with the conformity assessment standard. Again, on our routine surveillance visits, these are the things that we do look at in detail. Now, I did briefly say I would introduce you to accreditation costs. Now, all our fees are actually published on our website, so it's open to the public. This can obviously be found on our standard terms of business, which are provided on the UKAS website. So you just do a search for that. We also provide a lot of scenarios around cost of accreditation. So a typical cost for a small testing laboratory with a very simple scope, an application fee normally is around £1,500. Pre-assessment, which is optional, could cost you between £3,500 to £5,500. an initial assessment between 7.5 and 11.5, and obviously the ongoing surveillances can cost between £4,000 and £6,000. There are many other scenarios painted up there, but again, once you do apply, this can be discussed in detail with your assessment manager as well as our sales department. We do review our fees on an annual basis. So what next? Well, I'm going to just go back to the slide which I introduced you to before. So if you are ready to become accredited and start that journey, visit our UKAS.com website, which has got loads of useful information and relevant brochures that can actually help you on that journey. But do reach out, contact if you're applying for accreditation to our sales team. If you do have any technical inquiries or general inquiries, again, go to info@ukas.com. And again, I've introduced you to some of the training that we do provide, which there's a lot of detail about our training academy and the courses and the types of courses on our UKAS website. So without further ado, I will stop. And I think I'm now ready to answer any of your questions. So just looking, Julie Stewart, would the pre-assessment be carried out by someone specific area in our measurement discipline, or would it be a general assessment looking at 17025? Yeah, your assessment manager would be a party to that pre-assessment, but it would also have the relevant technical person with the relevant technical expertise to address those specific needs. So it would be a combination of people coming to do the pre-assessment. If the assessment manager had all the what I would call qualifications and technical expertise, then it may be just one person who conducts that. But yes, that would be discussed with your assessment manager, and he would guide you and advise you on what's probably best for your sort of business. But yes, in general, that person would have, or those people would have, the technical expertise in terms of what you're seeking accreditation for. Another question from Julie. How much feedback will the pre-assessment exercise provide? Now, obviously, it's not a complete assessment. We would look to make sure that you're addressing the key requirements and of that standard, and there would be a written report on that, and any deficiencies that we would identify would be written up in the report as well and discussed with you during the pre-assessment. Obviously, if it's a short pre-assessment, then we can provide less feedback on your system, but also I would always remind people, as with the initial assessments and any visits, we are sampling your organization. So it doesn't necessarily pick up everything, but yes, it is not cryptic. It is very specific, but what we can't do is provide you with solutions. So we can't tell you how to fix it. We can advise you on what typically happens within organizations, but we can't give you consultation. Rachel, is there an average timeline for accreditation to ISO 15189? It has taken 10 months so far from submission to date of a pre-assessment. It depends on the readiness of the organization, availability of resources to do your visits, Rachel. What I would do is probably, if you have any specific concerns, I would talk to your assessment manager, or we can look at that, because I don't want to talk about specific cases, but it depends on your readiness for going for that standard the availability of resource to meet your needs as well. So it can take longer. I've seen some organizations just have to go through various stages because when they applied, they just weren't ready for accreditation and had to do a lot of action. But we can certainly talk to you in more detail around that if you reach out to us. Alice, if we want to be accredited to 17065 as a certification provider for a standard that you haven't seen before, how much work does that take? So any area which is new would have to go through a development process. So again, an assessment manager would work with our development team, who would get in contact with you to determine whether we can actually provide that standard. It would then be assessed, and before that can be actually launched to be able to provide that. So there is a process which we go through, which would be in addition to that, to ensure that we can provide accreditation. We do, if we don't have in-house resource, need to externally go out and get that resource to be able to conduct any technical assessor expertise in that area. So make sure we have the right competence to assess your organization against that standard. Were the costs quoted for an annual surveillance visits for all visits in the accreditation cycle, or cost of each visit within the accreditation cycle? So we would normally do, it depends what accreditation standard it is. It depends on the size and the complexity of your organization. That was a simple laboratory. So the costs quoted were an approximation for that. Again, some organizations may be multiple thousands of people employed, operating internationally with many offices, undertaking a variety of scopes of accreditation. So the bigger and the more complex the organization, then the costs would increase. But normally you would have an annual surveillance, and every 4th year you would have a reassessment. So again, specifically, I would recommend that you reach out to us, and we can address that, particularly answer that question to your organization, David. And I'll take one more question, I think, because obviously we are running out of time. But I assure you, we will get back to you on all the other questions that are in the Q&A section. So, Pete, you've written, at which point after an initial assessment would you need to pay additional fees if you are not successful on the first visit, assuming a pre-assessment has been done? Irrespective of the pre-assessment being done, once an initial assessment has occurred, and subject to the findings, what we normally do is we would charge an amount of money to close out those findings. Now, those findings can be done remotely in the majority of instances. So any additional charges tend to be low. So if there were a few findings, we could charge a minimum of £0.25 a day. But obviously, if there are a multitude of findings and there is a lot of work to do, then that would increase. But in the majority of cases, it's less than a day. If you were not compliant with the standard significantly, then it may be such that we have to come back on site. So it depends on the outcome of the initial assessment and what's required. But again, the assessment manager would discuss that with you in detail, just to give you that feedback on completion of the initial assessment. So I'm going to reach out to my learned colleague. I think we've overrun. I think we'll bring it to an end. Just to be conscious that we will be providing you with a copy of this sort of presentation. We'll also provide you with a video, so you'll get a link to it. It will be on our website eventually. And obviously, we will answer all questions. So if I don't get back to you, somebody else within the relevant section will get back to you in terms of your particular questions.
Yes, and sorry to interrupt you, Paul. If anyone has any other questions, you can always send them to info@ukas.com, and that they will reach the person with the right knowledge to answer your questions in that instance.
Okay, so I'd like to thank you all. I hope this has been useful and wish you an ongoing successful day. Thank you.